Here we go. I feel like there's a way to do music that is fun and prioritizes making it feel like, why am I talking like that? I feel like there's a way to do music that is fun, that prioritizes making it feel like you are just playing, even when it is your job. I feel like that still exists. I just got back from Massachusetts. I was, let me lock in for a second. I'm going to pretend I'm talking to you. I'm going to pretend like I'm talking to you. I just got back from Massachusetts. I was up there visiting a friend. The reason I went up there is it's been part of my grand campaign to try and take more breaks and try and take care of myself better. So I'm doing like one thing that's a little bit out of the ordinary every month, which normally just looks like going out of state, getting out of the city and doing something. So that was one of them. Went up to Massachusetts. And since I'm kind of in the middle of this artistic and career upheaval thing, it was really interesting because they're also a full-time musician, but in a very different way. They did come up off the internet as well, actually around a similar time that I did, but are generally their scene that they're in is like a lot more live oriented. They make folk music, for context. And it was so interesting because they really enjoy what they're doing. They really enjoy what they're doing and they really enjoy their life. And I'm looking, and they're not the only one also doing full-time music that enjoys what they're doing full-time music. So I was kind of looking into this generally, especially after making the last two videos. A big question of mine was like, okay, well, let me look around at my friends at who's doing this full-time and who is enjoying it. Because to be honest, a lot of people that I know doing it full-time are kind of weighed down by a lot of stress and pressure and trying to one-up themselves, all this. Like, it can be quite difficult, it seems. So I thought, well, let me look around and try and find people that seem to actually be doing it in a way that they enjoy. So this person was actually a great example because, something we were talking about last time was where your money comes from. They're a good example of somebody whose money comes from the live scene. So playing shows. Last time I talked about one of the weird things with making music on my end was that my day-to-day activities didn't translate into actual outcomes at the end of the month. Whereas when you play a live show, that's like a very direct financial outcome from the way you just spent your last 3 hours. It was really interesting. The way they talk about it is what they feel like their job is performing live. And in a very literal way, that is the case. Like, that's where most of their money comes from. It's like an allotted amount of time where you clock in, you walk on stage. But the other thing is that they love performing. Like, they love that deeply and like connecting with people. And they talk about that a lot. And then the rest of the day, when you're talking about like songwriting or recording, songwriting especially, they were like, well, my songwriting looks a lot different from yours because I don't touch a laptop. I'm just sitting there with like a guitar or a banjo or piano and I write my songs. And then when I have enough songs, then I take it to a studio and I get in with a producer or something. And then we like record together. For me, it's so funny because this is kind of like the way that people have been doing this forever. But for me, that does sound really nice. Like this concept of you're writing and then like you have like this allotted amount of time to make recordings. And then the recordings are done. And then you perform those recordings. Now, obviously, my art is slightly different from that because I do really like playing on my computer and making all the beep boops. Something I asked them immediately, I was like, did you play video games growing up? And they were like, not really, like here and there. But like, for me, producing was actually kind of felt really similar to playing video games. And I love playing video games. So I feel like those go hand in hand in my brain. I do still love writing music on guitar. I've been doing that way longer than I've been producing, but I do love producing though still. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that the way they move is so different from how I move still in the music space. And I think that is contributing to how their well-being is. The other thing I wanted to talk about was their mindset as like a day-to-day basis? Like, how do they approach like your off days? You know what I mean? Like, when you wake up in the morning, do you feel like you have to be on a routine or like be on a schedule, like be pumping out a certain amount? And they just straight up were like, dude, sometimes I'll wake up at 11 and like make a slow breakfast and like really treat myself just because I can, just because it makes me feel cool. And like, that is definitely something I never would do. I think that's a very foreign concept to me and something I'm trying to do more of. We're just like really enjoying the fruits of your labor. Because like doing music full time, you are gifted with just this sort of infinite freedom, theoretically, which made me feel quite uncomfortable, to be honest, to a certain extent, because I would get that guilt that I was talking about before, where you would, you know, if I felt like I wasn't doing enough work or like doing less than like a normal full-time workload, I would feel guilty that I wasn't doing like a real job type of thing. Now, that being said, while they feel like, yeah, it makes me feel so cool and like powerful to be able to like, you know, power like over one's agency, to be able to take a morning like that and like be really kind to oneself, or like, you know, go to the farmer's market or like whatever. I mean, farmer's markets are normally on weekends, but like whatever, you know what I'm saying? Just spend your days how you want to spend them. The one thing they said to me in a conversation later was, introducing yourself, it always feels a little bit weird to introduce yourself as a musician for some reason. For me as well, I also feel like that. Not everybody feels like that. It doesn't have to be that way, but there's almost like this kind of like, oh, okay. I guess the implications when you introduce yourself to somebody that you're a musician, there's like a lot of implications there where it's like, oh, are you just like, you know, living off of a trust fund and just like making music like that? Or like, even if you're doing well as a musician, it's still kind of like, is that just like a fake job? I think. Now, this person I was hanging out with, they have a different living situation than me as well. This is important to note. They like live out in the countryside. And so obviously there's different like social tones when you're like going around introducing yourself to people in the countryside as like, yeah, I'm a musician. But it was interesting because while they were saying like, yeah, I love doing music full time, and like they did really take advantage of it for a while. They got a van and were like driving around the country, and that's how they would tour. But it was also kind of like one big massive road trip, like living out of their van. It was kind of like this beautiful, very bohemian vibe, which I feel like sometimes I think that I could have done like a much better job of like embracing the bohemia aspect of it. Cause it's like, I think for some reason I was just trying to make it a sort of like a full-time job when it just like a regular job. I think I was trying to tamper the shame of like being a musician, like, which doesn't have to exist. Like the shame I had around being a musician and not having like a real job, with trying to act like it was one. When really, like, artists throughout time have always been up to some fuck shit. Like, looking back at, like, Da Vinci or, like, the French, like, painting movements or, like, I mean, any music movement over the past 100 years, it's, like, very bohemian. And when I say bohemian, I mean, like, people are, like, living very alternatively and, like, they're interested in a bunch of different stuff. So, like, the reason I talk about Da Vinci is because, like, he's, like, classic ADHD head. He's, like, got fingers in, like, a million different arts and sciences. And, like, that feels like the type of vibe that I enjoy. I am the next Da Vinci. No, I'm just kidding. But like, that is the type of vibe that I'd enjoy, where it's like, wow, like I'm really interested in like data and coding or whatever. And I'm also really interested in music. And like, to be honest, like music is actually one of like the few arts that I engage in like super actively. Like I'm like making videos and stuff, but like I've got friends who like are painters and writers and poets and musicians as well. And like, you know what I mean? Like I feel like almost less artistic than like a lot of artists I know. And maybe that's why the bohemia didn't really stick with me. Cause I don't think I really subscribe to like I don't think that brings me like a whole lot of fulfillment, as doing something like completely different. I don't know if it was moving around all the time, but I think I've been craving stability like forever in my life, just like some semblance of stability. And then also like refusing to build the conditions, to create conditions in my life in order to build that stability. So we're going to be working on that. Dude. Bro, sometimes when I start rambling to this camera, some shit comes out that I just like was not ready for. I apologize for looking chopped today. So yeah, there's these really interesting dualities coming out where, you know, my friend is looking into becoming like a volunteer farmer because they really want to learn some like real hard skills and stuff. And they also just want to do other things as well. Even though they love the music thing, I guess one of the freedoms it brings to like not have to live off of a regular job is being able to do other things that you want, like farming. So that's all. I guess what we've been talking about is really like when you're making enough money to live off of with music, how do you want to spend your time doing it? But, you know, then there's the question of like, how do you get to the point? How do you get to that point? And do you want to get to that point? And I guess I'm just going to read. I wrote these notes as I was on the train home from the country, and I'm going to just read this off because I don't really remember what I said. Inside us, there are two wolves. There's the drive to be able to make money off of art and not have to be a part of a traditional system. And then I write, best way to make money on art, ? Like, where is the middle ground between feeling freedom and feeling like you can do whatever, but still feeling productive and a contributing member of society? Where is the middle ground between that full freedom and feeling like you're contributing? Do other people have that feeling? The feeling of unfulfillment. My question is, like, do other artists have that feeling of unfulfillment where you're not contributing? And then I write, maybe I should interview my homies, which I already did. Well, oh wow, I used to make an interview podcast, but and maybe I will. Maybe I will ask my homies about how they're feeling. Would you guys like to see me have conversations with people on here? I guess the real question I have is like, sure, I'm kind of talking from this position of like, I already got to the point where I can kind of live, where I could live off of it. And then I think made some choices, which I think were like incorrect for like quality of life. The reason I made those choices was to try to make the economics like foolproof, try and get to a point where I could like support a family off of the economics instead of trying to enjoy the fruits of my labor currently and play. So I think something that's important here is important to note is that those conditions made the art unsustainable to make, and arguably maybe worse. I did make like a lot more of it, but you know, I wonder if it was, I guess it wasn't like commercially successful, like the needle stuff, but I wonder how much of that, I wonder how much of that was attributed to just the conditions I was putting myself under. But it definitely was unsustainable because in the end I burnt out. So I think we just have to, when you get to that point, when you have like a little bit of success, it seems like it's important to prioritize conditions that make making art sustainable, which means it requires making art fun. Like it requires making the making of art fun. Maybe even like creating that like false procrastination creativity again with whatever, if that's like a different job or like your volunteer farming or whatever you want, I guess. Another person I talked to in the folk scene was saying something similar where they love playing live shows. And that's really like what brings them joy. I've seen a couple Instagram stories recently randomly just like, I adore playing live. Like it brings me so much joy. And like, I guess it's interesting because personally, like I also really like playing live, but it's not like, for me, it's not like a sort of game changing, as of right now, it's not like a sort of game changing, this is the best thing in the world. Even, I mean, I've been playing live like my whole life, playing in bands and stuff like that since I was like a kid. Like it's always been fun, but like it wasn't this sort of like life defining thing that it seems like for some people. And maybe that's like where like the real disconnect is for me. I don't know if it's also like the type of music I make. When I was making my first couple projects, I was very specifically like, I want to make music for people to listen to like in bed, like, and just experience just like when they're in bed, because that's like how I was making it. That's how I was feeling at the time. And I really like making that type of music. I think the interesting thing was at the time I was making that type of music, I was also playing in a party punk band where we were playing shows like every weekend for like, it must have been like a year and a half of like almost weekly shows. Just like screaming and like there's just, it was so much fun. It was only like really for our friends, except for like a couple of exceptions. And it was just literally at house parties. And with those songs, it was very much, those were trying to be written and like created for live settings. So maybe that was scratching a very specific itch. So I don't know. I guess I'm trying to figure out my own relationship with live performance and also like with the kind of music I like making. So yeah, in conclusion, I think you can do music full time in a way that's nice, but it does seem to involve still needing to keep the music as a hobby. So it seems like even when most of your money is coming from music, you have to find a way to make it feel like a hobby still, which is pretty cool. As for me, I'm about to start the process of moving out soon. We're like getting this logistical nightmare coordinated. And I think I'm going to try and like work as a substitute teacher when I go back to Monterey. And I'm looking into like, this is getting into something completely different, but I've been really interested in like wealth inequality and how that happens, and also maybe how to like minimize that and like tamper it. Just been really inspired by some people recently. So those are the things I'm looking into right now. Dude, am I going to go back to school? We're going to find out. Yeah, I think that's it for this week. This was a quick one and a chaotic one, but yeah, that's it. I'm Bryce, and thank you for being part of my life.